Welcome back, wannabes and creators, to another episode of The Complete Creative, the podcast that helps you build and sustain a better creative business. Today on the show, we have Jennifer Ann Gordon. Jennifer is a professional ballroom dancer, photographer, and writer. And I had her on the show basically because she does a little bit of everything. And as a creative now, we really have to be able to move in different circles and do different creative things and have sort of this ability to multitask in multiple worlds and inhabit multiple worlds. Now, I'm going to be honest, this episode goes off on many tangents. It's like no other episode that I've done on the show. We cover a wide range of topics from Gothic feminism in the 1800s and Mary Shelley to lobotomies, and also talk a lot about creativity and what it means to be a creative in this time. So it kind of goes all over the place, but I really, really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you do as well. If you want to learn how you can be more creative and make the best work of your life, go and pick up my free ebook, How to Make the Best Work of Your Life, over at thecompletecreative.com/best work. That's thecompletecreative.com/best work. That being said, let's get on with the show. Take it away, Jennifer. Tell us what you're passionate about these days.
You know, it's a lot of different things. Sometimes it just depends on the time of day, what I'm passionate about. So yesterday, this is when I get long-winded. Yesterday, I spent the day writing. I write a column for a horror magazine, and I end every column I write with the things that are inspiring me that day. And usually it's kind of the things that are inspiring me during the week. So I guess I would say my passions, and I'm passionate right now about my writing. So I am, deeply involved in writing a book and promoting another book. So I'm passionate about the written word, and I'm strangely passionate right now about Gothic feminist literature and how that relates to the way people were treated in the Victorian era with mental illness. So that's weirdly what I'm passionate about right now.
That's not weird. That's a huge passion of mine too. I mean, I think all the time about people like Mary Shelley and how how she's been not given the credit she deserves for founding science fiction.
Weird, huh?
It's super weird, but also not weird, given that we have a patriarchal society and have always.
What's funny is I'm actually I'm working on 2 books right now, and I know we're going to get to that later, but I'm using some sort of like Frankenstein symbolism in the second half of this book series that I'm writing. A lot about, who's a doctor and who's a monster. Again, when it comes to psychotherapy, back when nobody talked about psychotherapy, when they thought, if a woman's not sad the right kind of way, she gets shipped off to like a hotel just so she can rest because she's tired. So I'm passionate about how that sometimes doesn't feel like it's too different now.
Yeah, well, so one of the craziest, there's a couple of like the craziest therapies that I've ever heard of, but the one that has to be the most telling of where we were as a society, and maybe even where we are as a society now, is that they used to, doctors used to prescribe, them masturbating women.
I was just going to say the masturbation thing.
Yes, it's so crazy because it's also the other side is women weren't supposed to feel pleasure or any of these things, but then they were being
masturbated. So it's like a trap. I always felt like when I read about that, it's a trap. So, you've got this poor woman who is sad because of her female hysteria. And, she has menstrual cramps and all of those horrible things. And she sometimes reads books. So a stranger comes into her house and basically abuses her sexually. And if she does like it, she's a whore. And if she doesn't like it, she's frigid. And there's nothing in between there. It's a no-win situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, give me the ice bath and the leeches, I guess, any day before
Well,
before that.
well, this is where women becoming spinsters just like makes a whole lot more sense. Like when like you put the other option as like these are the other options, like you might as well just like screw off and like go live in a forest with like.
I know, with like a book and like allow yourself to have an imagination. Yeah, I've been writing a lot about how, women had to like kind of hide their creativity, hide the fact that they enjoyed literature, especially certain kinds of literature. Like, God forbid a woman would read Byron and get titillated by that. Like,
Right.
she might as well just, be stamped with a scarlet letter and just like sent away.
Yeah, it's funny because that you mentioned Byron, because like this goes back to Mary Shelley and
Mary
how she
Shelley.
founded, how she like
Yes.
started Frankenstein. So I have to go. Have you seen the meme that's like, okay, so a spinster's 23 to 26, but like then it like goes from what they used to call the other names of people as they got older and older
Oh
and older.
no, I have not seen that, but now I need to.
Yeah, it's so great. I can't. I thought I had found the real one, but I didn't find the real one, so I can't like go through it now. But it is quite an interesting thing to talk about.
Have you seen the thing where it's like 100 reasons why women were institutionalized or anyone was institutionalized in the Victorian era?
Yes, it's
Like, it's
so.
like kicked in the head by a horse.
Yes, it could have been like literally, and it feels so like bad for everybody that lived there. That like I would have definitely been institutionalized because I have depression, anxiety, and Graves' disease. So
Oh,
all three of those
yeah.
things would have been like any one of them would have sent me into like an easy. And almost everyone that I know would have been in an institution
I know.
back in the day.
I think that too. Or if your family couldn't afford an institution, or again, on the other half of that, if they were really, really rich, you might have just been locked in the attic.
Yeah, or if you're really,
like,
really, really rich, you could just get lobotomized.
Right. Privately in your home after a doctor masturbates you.
Yes, it's like what a time we live in that like we don't have to do that. I mean, we have all sorts of other problems, but like they're not like manually masturbating and then like lobotomizing you as a like legitimate form of practice. They might still do it, but like at least it's like frowned upon now.
It's frowned upon. And it's not necessarily because like, oh no, this woman's now 34 and she's never had a child, so she's useless to me. Let's turn her into a vegetable so I can marry a younger woman and not have that whole stigma of leaving my wife. If she's unwell, I can leave her.
Yes. Well, this is a topic that I could talk about for literally ever because
I know, me too. I know. I just
it's fascinating. And it's fascinating when you look back and like I think it was like JFK's sister was like lobotomized.
Yes.
Or like I was like shocked. It's like shocked at like when you look at like just like what they did to people like not very long ago. Like
no. My aunt has schizophrenia, and when she was first diagnosed, she was a teenager, and she was immediately hospitalized and given, shock therapy before it became something that's more humane now, ECT therapy. But back then, they just literally electrocuted her for months on end, and then plied her so filled with Haldol that she was basically a zombie. And they're like, well, that's good because now she's quiet.
Right. And that's a big, it's like, and now she's quiet. And that's all that really matters is that she's like quiet now.
That's legitimately the plot of the book I'm writing. Wow. It's just keep her quiet. Whatever you do.
I hate that this happened, but I love that we're talking about it. And I want to go back to something that you talked about before, though, which was like your varied interests. Because I was just listening to a podcast episode that was talking about slow multitasking and how beneficial it is for creatives and how the geniuses throughout history have used it. So someone like Albert Einstein would be working on like 4 or 5 papers that he would switch between as depending on like when his mood strikes. And I find that when I talk to a lot of creative people, they're sort of working on 5 things at once, or they're sort of they're not just a ballroom dancer or a
Right.
writer. They're like both of these things or five of these things kind of all like smushed together simultaneously, and they kind of have to switch between these things just to keep themselves from getting bored or to keep the creative juices flowing. Do you find that for you as well?
Yes, completely. And what's funny is, so you did mention ballroom dancing. That is like before COVID-19 hit, that was my day job, my full time, every day, go to work, teach ballroom dancing. And I would perform a lot all over New England at all different, fun events, everything from Great Gatsby events to masked balls to Goblin King balls to Harry Potter themed things. So with the dance business, with ballroom dancing, especially in teaching ballroom dancing, I have to be very, very out there. Like, I have to be smiling and engaging people in conversation. And every lesson I teach is a party. Every group class I teach is a party. And that's part of my personality. I am very outgoing. And some people who only know that part of me, when they look at the photography I do, which is of like abandoned buildings and old prisons and old mental hospitals, when they see that and when they read my work, my books, they're just like, what the, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to swear on your show. Can I swear?
Go for it.
They're like, what the fuck happened to you? Like, how are you both of these things? How are you, a smiling girl in a pretty dress who's like putting on a ton of glitter for your eye makeup? And how are you this person who's writing about like the slow demise into madness due to grief? And I think I have to be both because, like you said, like if the real creatives, like the people who that's what fuels them, they need all of these outlets, or else they'll go mad. They'll be locked in the attic.
Yeah, so it's so interesting that people ask you that. People ask me similar things, and I always like, it's so weird to me because everyone that I know who's a creative that like writes like these like sweet romances is like posting about like murder threads like on Facebook, and everyone who's like, writing horror is like a huge Disney fan. I actually like I was shocked several years ago when like the darkest humans that I had ever met, like all the people that I know in the horror community basically, are like also obsessed with Disney. And it's a thing. It's called like, there's a thing called Disney goth. It's like a whole like subset of like Disney culture, but like most of the time the darkest people are also the ones who like the lightest things. And not quite sure why that is. I think
it's that yin and yang. It's that dichotomy. If we can't be always dark. I mean, I love horror. I prefer to read horror. I prefer to watch horror movies. I write horror. But I mean, and I like going to like haunted buildings, and I like looking at cemeteries. But I also, again, I'm the smiling girl. And even the column I write for the horror magazine, I try to make the column funny. So yes, it's in a horror magazine, but like yesterday I wrote a column about the novelists I blame for the reasons why I've had sex in cemeteries in my life. Like, full blown, gotta blame Byron, full blown, gotta blame Anne Rice. So it's like humorous takes on why we're so dark.
It's so, and so, I've built a lot of businesses in my life. And like, as a creative, I think that one of the things that pains me so much is this, when you're talking about building a brand, right? Like, you kind of have to choose. You're like, okay, so when I go out into the world as like an author, I can't be both bubbly and death obsessed. Like, I've got to pick one, because if I pick both, people are going to get confused.
I just let them be confused now. I was talking to two of my co-hosts that host my podcast with me about the article I wrote about the should I have sex in cemeteries or something like that. And I was like, should I put this on my Goodreads page? Is this my brand? Is this who I am? And they're like, yes, that's who you are. You're a ballroom dancer. You're a burlesque dancer. You're a horror writer. that is your brand. Your brand is, screw it, let's have sex in a cemetery, the brand.
Screw it, let's have sex in the cemetery, the brand. That's I would be interested in seeing what the overall branding looks like for that.
I think I don't think it's up. I can publicize it. I would have to do it in like comic book form. It would have to be more like or else it would just be straight up pornography.
Yeah. Okay. So I always get in this habit of having these really nice conversations and then never actually being like, hey, why don't you introduce yourself to like 15 minutes in the show? And we're about 15 minutes into the show, and it's that time where I'm like, oh crap, like nobody knows who you are. So how about you just step back for a second and talk a little bit about your journey, what brought you to creativity, and just like, you know, what the things that make you you.
So thank you, everybody, for listening to me babble for 15 minutes without knowing my name. I am Jennifer Ann Gordon. I live in New Hampshire. I'm a professional ballroom dancer and horror novelist. I've always been creative. Like from my earliest memories were this mixture of doing like writing little stories or playing bookstore or painting things. So I blame the fact that I cannot do math at all, and science baffles me. So when it was time for me to go to college, I went to a real college. I went to UNH, the University of New Hampshire, and I tried very hard to be a psychology major. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say I tried really hard. I tried for basically a semester to be a psychology major, but then I realized I would have to take statistics, and I had a panic attack, and I immediately switched from psychology to theater. So I just started taking all these theater classes. And then I kind of grew bored with regular college. So I started taking classes at the New Hampshire Institute of Art because they didn't even offer math or science. It was just a fine arts school. So to me, that was a dream come true because I could take things like clowning and introduction to storytelling and character development and doomed women of Shakespeare, the class. So I went to school for acting, and I took some photography classes here and there. And I've always, since by the time I was about 21, 22, I have made my living in the arts in some way, shape, or form. And I'm very lucky that I've been scrappy enough to do that, which means I've had a lot of weird jobs, a lot of good jobs, but a lot of weird jobs. I worked in an art gallery, which is a real job, but I've also been a magician's assistant, which is less of a real job. I owned a comic book store for a little while, and I wrote or tried to write an independent comic for a bit, and I used to sell my artwork on Etsy, and I made a really good living doing that. And then I became a professional ballroom dance teacher. So that's kind of the journey. Writing has always been in there. It's always been, you know, in the back of my head, whether it's poetry or comics or now novels and short stories. That's always been there. Even, you know, I always saw myself eventually like being a writer. I thought it would probably happen when I got older and my knees and my body started giving out on me, and I couldn't dance anymore. I couldn't walk.
So what is the transition you've made? Because you said ballroom dancing is by definition like COVID unfriendly. Like how have you transitioned in the past couple of months? Or like, are you up in the air? Like, have you found mooring somewhere? Or how have you made that transition?
So yeah, it's not been a smooth transition, and I'm still hoping that the ballroom dancing will, you know, kind of kick back up again. In the past few weeks, we have done. My fiance is also my dance partner, and teach together. So we've started doing some social distance ballroom dance classes in our dance studio, where we're in masks, our students are in masks, everybody's in gloves, and we literally are just like shouting at them from 12 feet away. But we're not dancing with them anymore. Like we're not holding each other in our arms and waltzing around. So there's a little bit of I don't want to say a little bit of the beauty is gone, but but there's no social right now in social dancing. You can't dance with other people. And our studio where we work at the Let's Dance studio in New Hampshire, we really pride ourselves on social dancing. So all of our students dance with each other. They're all friends with each other. We have parties or had parties once a week. And again, everybody dances with everybody. In the group classes, everybody switches partners. So we don't have that anymore. And the few lessons we're teaching, everything is really spaced out, so our students don't even see other students. And in between every lesson, we have to disinfect the entire studio. So that's happening now. And again, that's only like 1 day a week that we've managed to kind of come back even at that level. So, and that's been recent.
So what are you doing the other 4 days now?
I have been lucky that I do have my writing, because my first novel was published on February 24th, and then 2 weeks later, we were in lockdown. So I've spent a lot of time promoting that novel, which is called Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent. It's on Amazon. And I've been writing a 2-book series. So I have a book coming out on August 20th, and then my 3rd book will probably be coming out in October, but I don't have a date yet. So I've been very busy with that. I've been making book covers and helping some of my friends who are authors with their graphic design work. I've helped the publishing company that I am with, called Breaking Rules Publishing. I help them with like a little bit of marketing, and I do some design work for them as well. So I'm always busy. I'm really always busy. Sometimes I think I'm busier now than I was when I was working 5 days a week or 6 days a week and writing, because now it's just, these long, crazy, endless days where you're just like, is it Wednesday? Is it Friday? Is it Sunday? And there's always Zoom events. I feel like, we're going to have like Zoom burnout by the time all of this is said and done.
Yeah, I felt it like 2 months ago or last month. I just stopped. I was doing, I don't know, Zoom calls every day, like twice a day, 3 times a day. And now I'm pulling back. So I'm doing them like once or twice a month now instead of, and I'm just like, I'm giving up those opportunities. I know that I need to continue them, but I just can't for my mental sake. I have to get back to writing and doing the thing that I actually do. Like I felt like, I used to be very good about putting the marketing and the promotion in like a bucket and being like I'm doing this at shows or for these 4 days or for these 2 weeks. And what ended up happening was suddenly I was doing marketing and promotion every single day and I was not writing. And writing feels, to me, the thing that I always have to understand is that writing is actually the most important activity that I do, because it's the only way that I can sell things. Like, I can't sell things if I don't write the thing, but you don't make money during the writing process. The actual writing process is like the opposite of making money. But the writing process is what makes all of those countless hours of the Zoom calls and the the promotional graphics and the being on Facebook all the time and look at me and Twitter. The writing makes, I guess, those hours worth it, all the marketing hours. But you're right, it's hard. It's hard because you can easily just spend all day, every day marketing, or falling down the marketing rabbit hole. Because there's always a new platform, or there's always a new thing to try, or there's always a thing to try to double down on, or there's always more money that you can spend. There's always a thing that someone's telling you.
There's plenty of money you can spend.
There's always a strategy that someone's like, no, you've got to try this, or there's always a podcast to listen to. So, and marketing leads to the actual money. By marketing and advertising, you actually make money. And with the creating, you're spending money because you take the book and then you get the editor and the proofreader and the cover designer and all of that stuff.
Then you book a blog tour, and then you're like, oh, I should buy some advertising. Oh, I should get featured on this place.
Absolutely. And so but but I've had to really retrain myself to say that the creating is where the money actually gets made, because the quality of the book determines how many people will buy that book, and all of the mechanics that go into the sales process after that only exist once the book is written.
Right. I feel like that needs to be drilled into every author's head. Also painters, people who, make jewelry, everybody. We need to give our creativity the respect it deserves. And sometimes I try to combine creativity and marketing. So the one part of marketing I really, really like to do is creating marketing graphics. Like if I get a really hot book review from like a great reviewer, and, they give me like one of those quotes to die for, where you're like, oh my gosh, this famous person just said this about my book. I like to make a promotional graphic. I like to make a promotional video. So that way I'm doing something creative, and it also gets, word out there. Besides me just like screaming into the void of the internet, like, buy my book, please.
Right, exactly. So
because no one wants to hear that.
You do so much different stuff, and I've never asked this question before, but it just came to me while you were kind of going through your bio. You do dancing, you do photography, you do writing, you do other stuff. Does creativity feel different when you're doing in any other medium, or does the feeling of creativity always kind of feel the same?
Oh, it does feel different. I feel like photography for me feels really personal, and writing feels really, really personal. And it's strange because, of course, once you do these things, then you send it out into the world, and it becomes less personal, but kind of even scarier when that happens. But dancing and performing, and those are an art that I do, and I feel it personally. But because I'm doing it for an audience, it's not as scary. And I know that seems weird because it should be scarier because I'm doing something for an audience, but I don't get scared by that. Like, being on a stage doesn't scare me at all, but writing something that's incredibly personal and sending it out into the world, that does scare me. And that scariness is also exciting. It's one of the reasons why I like it, but to me, it's almost like dipping your hand in like a fire.
Well, the thing with like doing live performance is people are very forgiving because they're part of the experience. When they're reading a book or like a piece of art, like, they are ruthless about imperfections. But like, if you flub up a line, or you're on a live broadcast and you just like, shit the bed for a second, like, just like you have a brain fart and you just can't, like, I think even though it feels more daunting before you start, because the audience is there with you, it is actually, and they're part of it, I find them so much more forgiving than like somebody who reads a book or even watches that broadcast later.
Yeah, no, I agree, because I think at the end of the day, I hope we're good people. Most people are good. Most people do have kindness to them. So if I'm dancing in a performance and I fall on my ass, people generally won't laugh. Not right then. They might laugh about it later, but they're not going to laugh to my face. Somebody reading my book at home, it can be like, oh, this is such a piece of shit. This is so depressing. People don't really talk like this. And I'm like, yeah, it's poetry. Of course I don't really talk like that. But I think then there's a bravery of like going onto Amazon and click-clacking a bad review. Like, I hated this book. It was sad. I'm like, oh, well, okay. Thanks for that 2 stars there. Like, and it hurts. And people, I think, are more willing to hurt your feelings, or more willing to do those things because they don't directly have to look in your eyes when they're saying, I think your work sucks.
Yeah, and they don't. I try very hard when I'm reading something or watching something to, uh, like connect with the creator who was doing it, so that I don't have that same feeling of like
Yeah.
I can appreciate the like the work, but this makes it nearly impossible for me to separate the art from the artist. And like when somebody's like shitty, like, this whole like J.K. Rowling thing that's going around now, I
Oh
just like it
God.
makes it really hard. Or like when I
Yeah.
heard like Bill Willingham and Fables and like or like Warren
Oh,
Ellis, like I just can't appreciate, I can't read these things. It makes it so hard to read these things again, because
yeah.
part of the way that part of the reason I enjoy it is not just the words and how they connect to me, but how they resonate between me and the person who made the thing in the first place.
Yeah.
And
No, I get that. I mean, so especially, I mean, we're all living through this, like, the Me Too movement, and there are actors like Kevin Spacey. You can't watch any of his movie. I mean, I can't watch any of his movies anymore. It makes me physically sick, and I loved him as a performer.
yeah,
Louis C.K., who is a despicable garbage monster, was my favorite comedian.
right. And that's one of the, so that I just read a big think piece on that, and it's like he's sort of the grandfather of this whole like speak truth movement. And then
Yeah.
you find out that like he's never spoken truth at all on any of the things that he's ever said, and it's like
Yeah. Like, oh, he made me believe a lie.
right. And it's like not only that, but he like spawned this kind of like a resurgence of these movements from the 70s and 80s, and you're like, oh, like, well, does that taint the whole movement? And
Yeah.
like, what does that say? What does it say that he could for so long like hide all of this stuff, and that I connect, like, what does it say about the connection I had to it before? Like, is
Right.
all of that false? Is that like real? Like, you start questioning, your own taste of things also when that happens, or at least that's what happens to me.
No, I felt the same way. And I remember, like, after, like, Louis C.K. gate broke open, and I was so upset because there's like one of his bits that, honestly, every time I would watch it, I would legitimately laugh so hard I had an asthma attack. And it's his bit called "The Saddest Hand Job in America," and I'm not sure if you know it, but it was really funny. And part of it being funny was like about how his wife didn't want to touch his dick, and then I just sit here afterwards thinking, well, of course she doesn't want to touch it. He's disgusting, and of course now, like, it comes out that he's just like a serial masturbator, and then that like really funny skit becomes almost like a horror movie to me, because it's everything that was wrong with him, and it was the thing that I found the funniest about him when I liked him.
Yeah, it's really
It's gross.
it is, and it shows how like fragile creativity is, and like how especially comedy or like novels. I find myself able to separate it more when it's like maybe not an actor, but like a showrunner of a television show or something,
Yeah.
where there's like so many other people that
Like
are
Bryan
involved.
Singer.
Yeah, that one's tough, but like I was thinking of Aaron Chase, the Avatar
Okay.
showrunner.
Yeah.
It's like I can still enjoy Avatar, and I have a bunch of friends who worked on Avatar, The Last Airbender, and like I think because there's so many people between that person and the screen that I'm able to somehow, like in that one specific example. But then every time I watch Avatar or like the dragon, the Last Dragon King, or any of his work, I'm like, oh, am I like now I'm just making like, am I just making an excuse like other people are making an excuse for like the thing that they still love? And like
No, but you're right, because he wasn't the be all end all of any of that. Like, it's the same thing with like a Harvey Weinstein. Yeah, his name is on half the great movies that have come out in the past like 20 years. We can't hate all of those. He didn't write them. He was creepy and disgusting, and they're tainted a little bit, but, you know.
Well, so like, okay, so let's, man, we're getting into a real weird tangent, but I gotta go. I gotta go through it because it's really hard because, like, okay, so what do you say to you can say that about Harvey Weinstein, but can you really say that like Kevin Smith and Quentin Tarantino like didn't know? Like,
no,
did they not know?
Yeah.
And then like you're like, okay, so like they knew, so at least they were complicit in this ability for him to continue, and like. So does that taint their movies? Like, does it taint their movies? Like, I think that it does taint the movies and my enjoyment of them, because when I think about those movies, I think that those like all that require what is the quote? Like all that is required for tyranny is for good men to stand back and do nothing, while evil men, you know, like, and I think of that ideal, and you know, Harvey Weinstein was awful, but
but people letting him get to that point is just as awful,
right?
Like,
and
turning a blind eye,
right? And you're like, you're talking about a system. So the other side of this is like, well, Kevin Smith and Quentin Tarantino and all of those were also like a slave to this system, where we think of artists and creatives as being sort of these people that aren't sullied by that capitalism that like you know, a banker is, but you know, Kevin Smith Kevin Smith saying no, or like Kevin Smith saying like don't do that, means he doesn't get funding. It means like he could get torched all over town for like his next movie, and so you're like, okay, well, like is that a him problem? Yes, it is, but it's also like a going back to the systemic problem of like that all people are faced with.
Yeah, it's a society problem. It's a, you know, and it trickles down all the way to like, you know, you and I, smaller artist types, writers, comic artists, like people who are, you know, just starting out in a business, and you get some recognition, and maybe, you know, somebody important takes a liking to you, and that person ends up being a garbage monster. But it's hard. It's hard to say no to opportunity. And I think we're getting better now at saying, whoa, I know you're giving me an opportunity, but I'm not going to risk my own self-worth for that. But you still think about it. You still go, oh, is it worth it? Is it worth me selling my soul a tiny bit to be in this play, or blah, blah, you know, whatever it is.
Yeah, so it's been really interesting to listen to, especially the Warren Ellis like revelation, because a lot of my friends who I've wondered for years like why they weren't more successful, or like they were successful for a time and they just like kind of fell off, and like why that happened. Because they're great, their books are still great, and you know, so many of them came out and were like, well, yeah, I didn't get a new work for like 5 years after like doing this, or like my career took a complete nosedive after like I stopped associating with Warren Ellis for all of this stuff. And you're like, oh, these are people who actually like, look what happens when you actually take the stand. Like, look what happens when you take the stand. Like, you take the stand and like your career is like,
you're like, oh, now I'm homeless. Great.
Right. Or like, just like not like, you know, someone who is working on a book for DC, and then like suddenly they're like, well, I'm not going to work with this editor. And then that editor tanks them with everyone. And suddenly their career is over for speaking out. And, you know, it's a really, like, it's really tough to balance all of this stuff out. And it's becoming, I don't think it's becoming harder and harder. I think it's becoming harder and harder to hide from the fact that like there is this insipid, insidious undercurrent of the creative industrial complex that promotes people that have no shame and that want power, and the people
this is why you have to start writing horror.
Well, or just
channel
like it. This is really the reason why I keep coming back to the fact that like, well, I can keep my integrity if I just figure out how to market all of this myself and don't publish other people's stuff, because like then it's on me. Then like but then even with independently, like, you still have to worry about, like, okay, so what is my relationship with Amazon and Facebook? Like, I need them.
Yeah.
Am I complicit in Facebook's handling of the Rohingya in Myanmar? Like, am I complicit in Jeff Bezos's vindictive streak where he like tanks other companies and like, you know, undercuts everyone and destroys publishing? Like, I have to be somewhat complicit in this, but like, at what point do you, like,
I mean,
where is the line?
Yeah, I think the days are gone where, you know, you can really, really, really like self-publish your own thing and like, you know, hand bind your books and staple your comics together and print them off at Kinko's and sell them at cons. Like you need the backing now. You need the Amazon to almost make you legitimate. Like I used to make comics and like literally print them at like Kinko's and places like that and sell them at cons. And this was before like we were even really thinking about putting things on Amazon. And was that harder to do? Yes. Did I make no money? Yes. Did I still accidentally, you know, hire an artist who I found out beat the crap out of his girlfriend? Yes. It still happened then when I was just stapling books together at Kinko's.
Yeah, it's so all of this stuff is so fraught, and so you clearly think about this at least as much as I do. How do you manage to keep like going forward when like all of these kind of morally ambiguous questions keep popping up and they don't seem to be stopping popping up? If anything, they're going to keep popping up more and more and more in the future.
Well, I think so. As an artist, as a creative, I have to create. It's part of who I am. So I can create things and, you know, type and type and type and type and nobody can see them. But again, we're taking out part of the reason why we're doing that. I don't want to let the world and the systemic misogyny and racism and awfulness that's around us destroy something that I think is good within me. And at the end of the day, we need art. We need novels. We need comics. We need paintings, because that's what's going to inspire people to get their asses out of bed the next day and hope amidst all of this, you know, awfulness of the world, from pandemics to you know, police brutality, that there's something beautiful or inspiring. And that's our job as creators. We have to do that. If we don't, then, you know, I'm sorry, like the Harvey Weinsteins win, the Donald Trumps win. That's just, you know, there has to be more to life than selfishness. And if I write a book or take a photo or do a performance, but we're just going to say books right now, and one person reads it and it touches their soul, then it has to be worth it.
I love it. All right. So you spoke about your books before, but as you move into the next segment, I think this is a great transition to your work and sort of and what you're here to talk about. So I'll give you the floor to talk about you know, your books and yeah, let us know you know, what you're working on now.
Okay. So I mentioned it before. I had my debut novel was released at the end of February. It's called Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent, and it is a gothic horror novel that deals with grief and human forgiveness. It follows the story of a man named Adam who's an alcoholic, and his wife and his young son die in a car accident, and he feels incredibly responsible for this car accident. And because of that guilt that weighs on him, and it kind of wakes up trauma from his childhood, he slowly begins to to descend into madness because of the grief, and because of the way he was raised, he has no ability to love himself or forgive himself. So he hears about an island off the coast of Maine that is, supposedly haunted, and he goes there for the sole reason to connect with his 4.5-year-old son, to say sorry. But once he's there, he's kind of embroiled in this, I keep calling it a menage a guilt. He stays in a boarding house and with an elderly man and the ghost of the woman that man murdered 60 years before. So it's a horror novel, but it's about grief, the horror of grief, the horror of unchecked mental illness, which is kind of a common theme in my work. So that's Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent. That's the book that's out right now. My next book is coming out on August 20th, and which is also my birthday. And that one is called From Daylight to Madness, and it follows the story of a woman named Isabel in 1873 who gives birth to her first child at the very ripe old age of 36, and the baby dies after a few minutes. And her husband and her family thinks that she's not grieving properly. Like, however she's grieving is making them very uncomfortable. So they basically keep her as drugged as they possibly can until she becomes too much of a nuisance to them, and they send her away. So it's her story. So it's feminist Gothic horror. I'm excited by it. I'm passionate about those subjects. So that's what I'm working on. And that's actually, From Daylight to Madness is actually a 2-book series. And then the second half of that story, which will follow another character. I don't want to give too much away about that one, but that book is called When the Sleeping Dead Still Talk, and that will be out in October.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds like things that are right up my alley. I'm going to send you a couple of books that I wrote that are very much in the grief and loss kind of column. They're not Gothic horror, but they are. It's been a big part of my own work of like grief and loss and death and thinking about like these things. Yesterday, one of our dogs is quite old, and my wife has this habit of whenever she sees the dog like just tired or like listless for a minute, or like she doesn't want to come out of her kennel, she's like, oh my God, is she dying? Is this it? Is this the end? Is this the end? Is this the end? And so I was talking to her at dinner last night, and I was like, that stuff's going to kill you if you like think that way. Like, it is important to come to terms with the fact that this thing you love is going to go away. But it's also important to like understand that it probably is not going to be today, and that if you think the best but prepare for the worst, it's probably going to be better for you than thinking that every time she coughs, that's like the end, because that's not good for you. That's not good for her. It's not good for anybody. And I too have been the owner of elderly dogs, so I understand that plight. And I don't want to say what's funny, but a lot of people ask me about Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent because it's about grief. And they're like, well, what inspired you, blah, blah, blah. And we've all had loss in our life. I lost my father. I've lost a lot of people. But part of what stemmed the really raw part of the grief that I was writing about in that book was actually I did lose my dog last summer. And this was a little dog who was basically my soulmate, a little Yorkie Shih Tzu who saved my life, like actually physically saved my life. I was being assaulted by somebody, and this little dog literally got between me and the person who would have killed me, this little 10-pound dog. So losing that little dog, it broke my heart. It broke my heart so much. And
And a lot of the loss that I wrote about in Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent, it was the same feelings. Like it wasn't a person I lost, but it was something, someone, my little guy who I loved more than anything.
Yeah, one of the things that I love most about writing is that it's a way to process things that you were feeling at the time. Like it's very hard for me to just write like a dispassionate book. Like it's important for me to like be able to process that stuff. Is that also important for you in your work?
Oh yeah, mainly because I don't have health insurance and I can't be in therapy anymore. But yeah, my main work, my Gothic and my dark work, it is therapeutic. I write a lot about mental illness. I've had a lot of mental illness issues in my family. And it's a way to process it. And it's a way for even me writing about it, it's a way for me to understand it myself. Sometimes putting something symbolically, when you really kind of delve into that, it makes you understand things on a different level, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Like I sometimes think I got a handle on my own depression and my own anxiety, my own like silly fears about things. And then I put that in my writing. And then I think, now I understand that. Now I see.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been lovely. We're at the end of our time together.
We are.
I want to give you a chance to just pull it back for a second and give us the one piece of advice that you'd like us to leave the show with, and tell us where we can find you, and then we'll say goodbye.
Okay. Oh, one piece of advice. I knew this question was coming. I would say, don't let yourself stop you from doing something. And I say this because as creative people, we always kind of, ideas get rattled around in our head and we think, is this too much? Is this too dark? Is this too sad? Is this too weird? Am I too angry? And I would just tell people to be to everything, be too weird, be too angry, get it out there, explore it. Because if you're feeling something, chances are we're all feeling it. And some of us might not be brave enough to talk about it or express it. So just lean into the parts of you that you're the most scared of and embrace it. So yeah, be write, create, do the things that you find terrifying. That would be my advice. Where people can find me, my books are on Amazon. So my name is Jennifer Ann Gordon, and that's Ann with an E, like Anne of Green Gables. And you can also find more about me on my website. Again, that's jenniferannegordon.com. Jennifer, JENNIFER, ANNE, Gordon, GORDON.com. My website's kind of fun because it has my photography and some of my paintings, and it has my book trailer, and my book trailer features my favorite song, and I got permission from the band to use it, so that's exciting. So yeah, you can find me there, and on Facebook, of course, Jennifer Ann Gordon, and Instagram, I won't lie, has a lot of pictures of my dog.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for stopping by, Jennifer. It's been great to talk with you.
Yeah, it was great.
So that was my conversation with Jennifer Ann Gordon. I know it was wild and totally out there, and unlike many episodes I've had on this show, but I really, really enjoyed it. I think that it shows the insight of a creative mind, just how many things and places that we bopped between. And I hope you got a lot out of it. If you did, please go check out Jennifer's work. And also head on over to thecompletecreative.com and subscribe to the show. Enjoy the epic blog posts, the free courses that we have there. And if you want to learn how to become a more creative human yourself, then go check out how to make the best work of your life at thecompletecreative.com/best work. That's it for me. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe this show, and I'll talk to you next time.